Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am very excited to share this conversation with you today. I have a wonderful human with me here. She is a gifted medium, an intuitive, a healer, an acupuncturist, a registered nurse, a mom, a wonderful bright light. We have a spiritual medium, Erika Anderson, here today to, help demystify some spiritual topics, dive into the realm of spirit, and more importantly, most importantly, I think, is to share her story. Because as you all know, it's all about the sharing of stories. So, Erica, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeanette. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to talk to you today.
I'm so happy to have you here. So, it's interesting because we met through a course that you
Mhm.
took, and you had just such divine insights so fast, and you were so calm, cool, and collected um, in your energy that I could tell right away, like you knew what you were doing and you've been doing this for a while. And it was just so neat to see. So I would love for you to share with everyone kind of a little bit about you, but like, how did you find yourself on this path? How did that start?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you for that reflection, and I appreciate that. How I found myself on this path was from a series of events that happened in my life. There's kind of a lot of a buildup. I could go back to my childhood and being really sensitive emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and really always feeling like I needed to shove that into the back corner of who I was because it was really labeled as being too sensitive. And I really struggled with that part of my identity for a really long time because I thought something was wrong with me for being so sensitive. I really thought it was a weakness. I thought that I needed to be able to be strong and get through life and really like harness my abilities as a human and be a good person. And um in that sensitivity, there were lots of metaphysical, spiritual things that happened. I think similar to you, when we talked about your story, I had a lot of mystical experiences as a child. And I just kind of accepted that that's how it was, good or bad, magical, or even sometimes a little bit scary for me. But as I got older, my sensitivity really turned into anxiety.
Mhm.
And it led me kind of down this path of being a really anxious person, and where I was once really spiritually trusting, it anxiety kind of took over. And I lived my life really successfully through that anxiety. I was really good at micromanaging myself to feel safe and micromanaging others to feel like a semblance of fake safety. Um, until I was in my 30s, late 30s, and one of my children had a near death experience. And it was so traumatic for me, for our whole family. And I recognized that I had had all of these intuitive feelings building up before it, and I kept ignoring them.
Mm.
And I kept ignoring them because I didn't want to face the reality of what that experience was telling me was coming. And so when he almost died, as far as his experience in my life, it was like everything came crashing down. And I went through a dark, dark tunnel of despair and anger and resentment. And I was just so depressed until one day I looked at myself. I was like walking down the stairs to the kitchen, and I saw myself from out of body. I could see myself go into the kitchen. I could see myself like making tea. I could see like who I was and what I was struggling with from outside of myself. It was like a vision I had never experienced before. And I recognized in that moment that if I didn't change, that I was going to lose myself, and that my family deserved me to be whole. I deserved me to be whole, and that I needed to stop fighting reality and start accepting reality, because out of that near death experience, he had a lifetime disease. It was the result of it. And he's doing great now. I just want to not trigger
Mm.
people. He's doing
Amazing.
wonderful. Um, but so that was the first day that I started meditating. And I started meditating by following YouTube videos. I had no idea what I was doing. I never wanted to meditate in my life. And but I recognized I needed to like find this place to quell the voice in my head that was telling me how awful everything was and how awful I was. And I started meditating, and I did that for like 2 weeks. And then one day I was like, I can do this on my own. And so I had my computer out with YouTube pulled up, and I shut my computer, and I was like, I'm just going to do this on my own. And so I sat there and I started going through just like my chakras. And I don't know how to explain this, but it was like as the energy started moving up my body, all of a sudden it was like combusting inside of me. I was having a Kundalini awakening. I didn't know what it was, but the energy was like electricity moving through my body. And it was like breaking up these old wounds and breaking up these old stories and all of these things I was holding on to. And I was like holding on to my knees. I remember this like for dear life because it was just pulsing through me. And so that's where it all began. Um, after that, I started having like night visions of spirits. I started seeing like these weird energetic things. Like it would be like frequencies, like at
Yep,
night.
I know exactly what you mean.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah. I had
yep.
no idea what was going on, but it was just like this constant wave of like, what is happening? This is so beautiful and so different than anything I ever knew. And then I started having experiences with past loved ones. Um, and I could see them, but I couldn't hear them. Like I didn't know the language to communicate with them, right? I knew they were there. I could see them there.
Mhm.
And this went on for a while. And I remember talking to my husband, and he's like, I don't know what to say.
Totally.
And I was like, okay, classic.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to find some people who do know what to say because I didn't know what was going on that level. Even seeing like orbs in my room at night. And I'm like, what is this? And so then I started going into mediumship classes and I had like 4 or 5 different mentors over the course of a period of time. And then my life started changing at a really rapid pace as obviously it became a huge calling. And um, it was like flying down the freeway with no brakes. I couldn't stop even if I tried. And
Mhm.
my life, that is how I got into mediumship. And that's where it all began. And
Amazing.
yeah, it was a wild, wild beginning.
No kidding. And it's so interesting is the more we share stories of like people's journeys into their spiritual awakening to mediumship, whatever, so often there's a big trigger. There's a big life trigger of some kind that kind of like forces the hand. But when they often say, like, when I look back, I could see it was something was trying to talk to me or message me or communicate with me leading up to it, but I wasn't trusting it, right? Like with you, with your son, you were getting pieces of it until it just kind of like blew up in your face and in your life and created this upheaval about everything to get you onto that track.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
as even in my teenage years and in my 20s, I had these incredible experiences with spirit where I would be guided to very specific things and I'd follow through and I'd do it. And then I would just go on with my day. I never thought it was anything. I was just like, oh, this is how we live life. I didn't call it spirit. I just thought it was like something spiritual that happened to me. And but as my anxiety got worse, like I started shutting that down. And I think that's something that a lot of people on the path do because it feels so overwhelming to be faced with something that we can't understand that's out here, not realizing that it's in here.
Mhm.
And when anxiety in here is so strong, it's actually out there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we get
Yeah.
our wires crossed. And I think that's something I hear about a lot of mediums have a similar
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah, a big anxiety piece. And did you find, I'm curious, Did you find that learning how to master or understand your anxiety helped you to then understand your gift?
Ooh, good question. So when I started meditating, um, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know why I was meditating. I just had heard multiple times throughout, many decades that it was a good thing to do, that I never
Mhm.
wanted to do. And so what I was trying to do in my head was to find a place of quiet. Right. And I think that when I got into that place of quiet, it opened a space for spirit, my higher self, the spirit world to come in and be like, hey, we're here and we want to help.
Mhm.
And so my anxiety didn't really go away for quite a long time. It was more it was more as like the spiritual awakening, like I moved through it and I allowed myself to heal the parts of myself that I thought was really ugly and weak. That's when my anxiety started decreasing.
Interesting.
Um and then in that healing is what opened myself up to spirit more.
Yeah.
Because I still have anxiety. I'm still like someone who experiences anxiety. I just have the tools now to like manage it.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like spirit shows up for me whether I'm in an anxious state or not.
Yeah. That's a good
And
point.
yeah. And
Yes.
so that's something that was also a process for me to learn because I also felt like for a really long time that, and I wonder if other people feel this way, but I felt for a really long time that anxiety and me having it was a sign of weakness, that it was a bad
Oh,
thing.
me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
totally did. Yep.
yeah. And then when you start actually realizing that it's just something we feel as humans, maybe it's not so bad as we think, and we can just allow our like heart to shine a little bit brighter through it. Like then we take the power out of the feeling of anxiety, like that we're bad for having it, because we're not bad for
Mm.
having it. It's just an emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that's so nice to hear because I think more people need to hear it regardless of where they're at on their spiritual journey. But like the anxiety is such a common part of it, but
Mhm.
it's not holding the judgment in that anxiety because anxiety, it makes us feel so weak, so vulnerable, so afraid. Um, but I find also anxiety can be such a clear gateway into what needs to be healed. So it's also can really be a tool if we're willing to kind of, you know, move through that. Because sometimes it can,
Yeah.
like, we just block it, right? But it's really inviting us in, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and that I actually totally agree with. It's like it's a signal for us to look deeper at something. And I don't know about you, and I'm curious about this for you, but when I feel anxiety, it's usually because I am afraid of something in the future, no matter how big or small. And it could be the future, meaning like 10 minutes, or the future, like 10 years.
Hmm.
And in my spiritual journey, I keep having to come back to the present. And
Yeah.
when I'm in the present, then there's no room really for anxiety because you're trusting that no matter what, you're going to find yourself in the present moment, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Do
Yeah,
you
it
still
is.
have anxiety?
Yeah, I still get it sometimes. I find I'm able to, like you said, I have the tools now though that I can recognize the anxiety now without fearing it and it overwhelming me. I can be like, oh, something's here for me to look at. And then I can look into it. Whereas before, when it would come knocking, I would be like, oh my gosh, no. And like want to run, want to hide, want to everything. So the sensation's the same, but my reaction to it is completely different. It's a calmer reaction to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. And for me, it's like if I'm in a good place, it's a much calmer reaction to it. Maybe I can even laugh at it. If
Yeah.
I'm if I'm in a harder place, like it's a bigger piece of information that's coming through, or it's about health, which is kind of a
Hmm.
trigger from that past trauma. It takes me a little bit longer to move through it,
Yeah.
but now I know that I trust the moving through it, right? And
Yes.
that's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
Um, and then that spirit, that my guides, that my highest self, that the ascended ones that are with me, I know that they're with me now, and
Mhm.
I trust that. And so it's like you don't really feel alone in the world, and so you know that it's
Yeah.
going to be okay no matter what.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so true. So here's a question for you. What was it, or how long did it take for you to really feel like you found that trust? Because a lot of people are like, I want to trust in this unfolding of my spiritual journey, but like, how do I know when? Like, how do I know what it is? And so everybody's is different, but what was it for you? Was it a certain amount of time spent, or was it a singular moment that kind of allowed you to really surrender into trusting?
hmm
What was
I think
that?
it, I think it was like, showing up for myself all the time and showing up for spiritual development. Mediumship was probably the catalyst of that trust, because when you go into mediumship, for me, it was when it all started, every clair was completely wide open for me. I was like on fire. I was completely open and I received everything, everything, everything. It was like unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It was so amazing. And the healing and the potential I saw in the readings from that. And this is when I was as a student in practice. And then it completely went away. I don't know if that happened for
That's
you, but
so common. Yes, I've had
yeah,
that. Where, yeah,
it
and then it's gone.
after yeah, so
Yep.
after like 3 months of thinking I was like God's gift to mediumship, it completely went
Totally. Oh my God.
away.
Yes.
And I quickly was realizing that I was shown what the potential and what the possibility was and the understanding of these realms were. But now I had to do the internal work. And so I was committed at that point. I was like, this is like nothing I've ever experienced before. I am going to show up. And so I showed up for all of my development classes. I showed up for myself with spirit. I meditated every day. Um, I showed up with a completely vulnerable heart when all of a sudden I had no more clairs left and I thought I was going to be like that forever. And so as I started doing readings from that blank slate, I started saying, I am going to trust you, Spirit, to show me. And I started building this world and this language with Spirit and with my higher spirit, um, of this is why I love evidential mediumship, because every time I was, verified that things were real and authentic, I was like able to take another breath and be like,
Mhm.
wow, this is happening. And so that trust became a process of, failures and positive results. Um, and as all of that was happening, I was learning to trust myself because I was as much a part of it as anyone else was in spirit. So that was kind of
Yeah,
a long-winded answer, but
that's great.
it's
Yeah,
not
that's
linear. It's not linear.
it is not. And I think that is like, if we can just pause and amplify that statement at this point, it is so true for anyone listening to this on their spiritual journey, whether it's mediumship, healing, whatever it is not linear. And there will be times where we get a ton of information and then there's times where it shuts off, usually
Yep.
to allow us to integrate or come into an energetic of trust or surrender. But like it's always ebbing and flowing. And so I think if we roll with that, then the journey can be a little less bumpy, right? If we can kind of like
Yeah.
find humor in it or roll with it.
And things that helped me realize that like we have seasons in our development. We have periods of time where our spirit is like, you are charged and ready to work. I have periods of time, and I see this for all my friends who are mediums, not that I have like a world of friends that are mediums, but I have a handful.
Yeah.
And times where you just really need to focus on your human life. And maybe it's your relationships, or maybe you need to do something for yourself, like take a trip. Like we have seasons in our spiritual development, just like we do in our physical realm. We get sick sometimes and we just need to like take care and nourish our body. And I think there's so much pressure in mediumship because when you start down the path, you like care so much, and it's so vulnerable to um, be connecting with a realm that other people can't see, or maybe you can't see and you just feel, and it could be perceived as embarrassing to get it wrong. And so
Mhm.
there's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on mediums, but there's pressure in like the spiritual development of like, oh, I should be further along than I am. again, it's not linear. There is no end goal. It's
Yes,
it's a journey. It's a
I
journey.
agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm curious for you, do you recall your most or one of your most shocking, revealing, mind-blowing experiences that really made you question what you were seeing, what you were getting? Like, have you had any moments where, like for me, for example, I remember the first time I saw fairies, I was like, are you kidding me? I have to talk about fairies. You're
Hmm.
really going to make me talk to this person about fairies now, right? Like, I didn't even
Yeah.
think they were real, but now I see them. Do you have any moments that really stand out that were something like that, where you were just like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The fairies, like I can even imagine you like,
I know, totally.
like I know that feeling. You're like, wow. It's kind of like when you're doing a reading, you're like, you're going to make me sing this song, aren't you? Or
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Or
Yeah.
say a phrase. I one time had a spirit who was like, please repeat it exactly as I said. And so I said to the person, I'm like, I'm really sorry. I don't normally swear, but I'm just going to give you the message exactly as I said it. And it was like a mouthful of something. And the people
Oh my
just
God.
started laughing because it was exactly like the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah.
love that. And that's how it is. And that's like what you have to do. You have to say it just the way they do because that's the whole purpose, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've had a couple of, I mean, I've had a lot, but it's like certain things that stand out in my head. I have never told anybody this one. This
I
is
love it.
okay. I literally haven't told anybody, but I feel like I can tell you and inadvertently all of your listeners. But
Perfect.
a big part of my experience in life is connecting with the spirits of the land. And I feel like that's so sacred to me. And so I take these long walks and where I am just out walking and talking to the spirits of the land. But one time there was a dead bumblebee on this trail. And it was in the middle of nowhere. And this is going to sound so weird to people, but there was a dead bumblebee and I picked it up and I was just like looking at it and I was just like giving it love. And I saw like these wildflowers and I set it into the wildflowers. And as soon as I set it down and like gave it a little blessing, um, the whole spirit of the bumblebee came out and it like
Mhm.
jumped out and it just like it was like a split second of this vision of the spirit of this bumblebee and it was masculine and it was beautiful and it was like a little fairy itself and it just said thank you and then it
Mhm.
went away and that was like a very potent moment for me of recognizing the life force in everything
Mhm.
and so that was outside of mediumship.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a mind bender for me. I was like, did that just really happen? Was that
Mhm.
really something that happened? But then in mediumship, there's so many things that happen. One of my favorites was I was reading for this woman, and I won't give any identifiers away, but she had lost someone really important to her, her mother. And I was communicating with her mother just kept showing me like cheerleading pom poms. And so I was like, I have to talk about the pom poms. She just keeps waving the pom poms. And my client just freaked out and was burst into tears and it was like one of those moments of saying that was exactly what she needed. And
Mhm.
earlier in my years as a mediumship student, I probably wouldn't have said it because I wouldn't have been able to understand it. And when
Yeah.
you get further along, you just trust what comes through. And those are the moments that um, mean everything. So I think, yeah, the weirdest thing was probably the bumblebee spirit, though.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And you know what? You're so right. Like with the pom-poms, it is really about giving what you get. Like you have to be willing to give what you get, even if you don't fully understand, because
Mhm.
like you are the medium between the person and the spirit. Like it's not for you to always understand why, but it's for them to understand. So there is that big surrender.
There's a big surrender with that. And it's also um, recognizing, and this comes with like the maturity of like developing as a medium, why you shouldn't just go out into practice right away, because part of the development process is recognizing that the mediumship reading has nothing to do about you and that any information that comes through, yes, it comes through your filter, but we should never judge it. And we need to always step back and like let the information go, because as soon as we start judging it, we get into our brain and then we're not connecting anymore with spirit. That's how I feel,
Absolutely.
anyways.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then coming back to that beautiful bumblebee story, I just love that because it's so interesting how through mediumship, people often, maybe not so much anymore, but people think like it's just talking to deceased spirits or angels or something. But when you're tuning in to higher vibrational energy, you can tune into all of the types of higher vibrational energies, which is the souls of animals or insects or plants or trees or spirits or, like it's kind of all of that. So I love that bumblebee story. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. I think of like mediumship is for me, and from knowing your story now, is the gateway.
Oh, yes.
Because, like, if you think about it, like evidential mediumship, and when you're talking to people who have crossed over and are no longer in their bodies, and you are sharing the evidence of their life and their experience and things that I would never know or you would never know when you're giving a reading, you're getting the validation that life continues on. And so, like, the gateway for me was I can't see these people anymore in their human form, but they're there. They're right here with
Hmm.
us. So then my question started to be, what else is here? What else is around us? And that's where I found you, and really was attracted to what your work in the world is, because there is a whole different kind of development and a whole different kind of trust into that aspect, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
the evidence is going to be different, or there might not be any evidence except for trusting yourself.
Hmm.
And so then it's a whole nother journey, but um, none less potent than evidential mediumship.
Yeah.
So I think of it
Wow.
as like, it's like a gateway drug.
It is like a gateway drug. It's true. It's very true. Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny. Okay, so how about have you ever had any experiences that really scared you? Anything that
Um,
really jarred you, either physically, mentally, emotionally?
yeah. And do you mean in like mediumship specifically, or do you mean in life, or?
I think like in a spiritual way, like somehow with
Mhm.
like a spirit or an entity or something. So yeah, more
Yeah.
mediumship wise.
I love that question because, and I'm curious about you too on this, actually. I know we're having a conversation, so I want to hear
Sure.
about this from you too. But yeah, so when I was a kid, I used to have a lot of like kind of scary experiences with like what I would call like dark energy. And I grew up in a super religious household, like very Catholic. And so I was very close to my guardian angels. Like I was taught to pray to them. I had opened my heart to them at a very young age. But as a little kid, like I had some very scary experiences where I would call on my angels, I would call on my sisters. And I think it was just kind of feeling into like the realms of dimensions that there are, but not really knowing that that was happening. Um, and that started going away as I got older and kind of shut down everything. And then when I was reopening up, like after the Kundalini and after like the spiritual development was in process, um, things like that started happening again. And I wasn't afraid anymore, and so it quickly lost any energy or any power. um I literally would just bring in the love and the light in my heart, and anything that felt negative or scary like lost power. As a medium, I've never encountered anything scary at all in readings or anything. And that's because I only work out of love. So when you work from that state of love, there's just no space for anything else. And but I've had like some funny experiences like on my own. Like one time I fell asleep on the couch and I woke up to this like face in front of me, and he looked really I don't even know, kind of like Gollum from Lord
Hmm.
of the Rings, kind of like
Yes.
that. And I woke up because he was saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And I was just like, why did you do that to me? And it in the past that would have been really scary, but I was just like, just move on your way.
Mhm.
Like, this is not, you're not welcome here. And I think like, because in our sleep, we're kind of in that astral realm where a lot of things can coexist. Like
Mhm.
sometimes people see if they can come interact with you.
Yeah.
And I'm just not really into that. So, but what about you? Have you had that experience?
Yeah, quite similar in some ways. Like I find when I was younger, so I would have different energies come around. Sometimes I would understand them, sometimes not. But then when everything started to really open up again, it was kind of just like everything was available. And so I
Hmm.
had to learn to set boundaries because I didn't know I could energetically, with my own heart energy, set boundaries of like, don't come bother me at nighttime. Uh,
Yeah.
don't show up right in my face. Like any of the things that would scare me based on movies I had seen or anything like that. Um, but I really remember that when I started to really kind of step into my power, maybe the first time I was stepping into my power in mediumship and feeling like, okay, I kind of know what's going on here. And I started accessing like ancient knowledge and ancient energies. That's when there was like a mix of really high vibe and then also very like dark, maybe demonic like energy that would sometimes come forward. But it was kind of the same as you. Like I remember this one spirit came forward and didn't look quite right, like looked like a person, but not quite right. And I could tell the vibe was off. And then did that kind of movie thing where it opened its mouth and then its jaw dislocated and the mouth opened even more. Right.
Oh,
I know.
yeah.
And I remember though, years before that would have terrified me. Like I would have run away. I would have just kept running until I passed out of just sheer terror. But I remember being like, no, you're pulling images of what you think is going to make me afraid from maybe what would have made me afraid. It's not working here. I'm just not interested in that.
Yeah.
And then with that energy, and it wasn't about being better than, it was just like, no, I'm not. It's like when someone comes to my door and wants to sell me, I don't know, something, I'm like, I'm not interested. There's no offense, no nothing. And it just would dissipate. And so I remember that was really significant because then I learned how my heart energy can affect whatever I want to connect into. So that, first of all, I didn't need to be afraid, number one, if anything did come up. And then number two, I had no intention to connect with that. So I wasn't really drawing it in. Like it was when I learned the boundary piece, right? And how my energy would either open something or close something was really significant. But um, I remember I made a rule with my guides that I was like, I don't want anything to show up right in my face, like the Gollum thing for you, right? Like
Yeah.
too close to my face and it would freak me out in the beginning. And I was like, anything can come around, but it has to be like an arm's length away, arm's length
Mhm.
away. And um, and so sometimes I would have kind of warped energy show up that way. But then again, it's just this heart frequency. I think if you're in the heart frequency, their energy can't even last long either. Right? Like it's just a
Yeah.
mismatched frequency. So it just kind of dissipates. But
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that. It's a mix matched frequency if you're operating from your heart. Like there's nowhere for it to land.
Hmm.
And like when you said when you were talking about like the ancient energy that you tapped into, and like the higher ancient wisdom and that higher ancient realm and almost like that dark demonic kind of force. Um, I do feel like that happens for people when they open up into their spirituality. And I think that's what was happening to me as a kid. And then what happened again and what happened for you is like you're kind of given a choice of
Yes, you
how you want
are.
to play in this world.
Yes.
And and I feel that power struggle on the planet a lot because there's something like that maybe feels like egoic and sexy with the darker kind of demonic force and and really like the longevity and the love is like an opportunity to go into that. Like there's you kind of it kind of closes anything else that's negative off, right?
Mhm.
um Mostly anyways.
Yeah,
But there's
agreed.
like I do see that like in the world right now there's such like um a power struggle and it really is coming out really strongly right now.
Yeah.
And I just feel like um I feel like I know how the story is going to end. And so that feels really good.
Hmm.
but it's interesting how we all have these choices all the time about how we want to be, you know?
Totally. I think
Yeah.
that's such a good point. That actually just came up recently with my guides when we were talking about different like influential people that have a huge soul purpose energy.
Yeah.
And ideally, the soul purpose energy is brought in for good, but spirit's like, remember, there's destiny and there's free will, and the free will choice of any person can deter the type of destiny that was maybe originally created, right? Like
Totally.
yeah. So, like, it is so much about our choices, so much about our
Hmm.
choices of like, where do you want to take this capacity,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. How do you want
Right.
to? Yeah, I think that the free will piece is one of the most important things that we take for granted. We have this free will, we have like these destined points in our lives, and all the way through our lives, we have our free will. So maybe we'll meet that destined point the way we imagined we would when before we came onto the planet, or maybe we won't because we'll completely alter our course. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I like it. It's true though. It's a great way to picture it. Because it is, and we dictate it all the time. And the same thing goes for if we find ourselves going down maybe a negative or darker path, we still can also make the choices to come back to the lighter path too. Right? Like you're not you don't deviate and then it's like, sorry, too late, not happening. Like the energy of the light is always welcoming you back with an
Yeah.
open heart.
And that just reminds me of something that I've been feeling in my heart lately too. And is that also usually we're so afraid of things, and we're so either hungry for power or afraid of things, and we want to like block these confusing kind of icky parts of ourselves. And we might feel that way even like in a community where we can only be around people who think and feel the same way as us so that we can grow stronger that way. But really, we're kind of all drinking the same water and breathing the same air. And so I think of like how we do that for ourselves, where we incorporate like the things we don't like about ourselves and not give power to our shadows, but allow ourselves to like love that part is how we heal it. And I think that way about the bigger picture of the community of this planet is like instead of ostracizing the bad guys, instead we invite them to our fire and we keep singing our songs and we let them just be a part of our experience until maybe they start singing with us, right? And like, and that's how I feel about my personal shadows and like my personal work. And that's how I feel now. I'm like starting to see, oh, I need to like incorporate that into the way I view the planet, because it's really easy for us to create this like experience of us versus them, of good versus evil, and like we're good and you're evil. And we may completely believe that, but that's not going to get us anywhere until we like open up the circle and like we invite all the ugliness in so that like our love can wash over it, right? Or maybe we realize that what we think is our love is part of the darkness because we're in our egos. I don't know, but I'm starting to realize that um my experience personally is like a microcosm of the macrocosm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
And
And the
it
compassion like you show yourself is the compassion you can show the world also for its darkness.
Yeah, and recognize that, and this is where I started, is like usually the things that we hate about something external is because we recognize something like that inside of ourselves that we want to push away. And maybe we don't push it away, maybe we give it love instead, and then it kind of dissipates, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know, something out there I've been feeling lately
Hmm.
and thinking about, because otherwise like the dichotomy and the diversiveness of this planet can drive someone crazy,
I
you know?
agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I think that's also why spirit always says, like, come back to play and get in your human body again. Like, get out of the mind sometimes and come back to allowing yourself the opportunity to play and find joy again so that you can embrace the shadows as well as the light,
Mhm.
right? Like, just bring it all into the mix because we
Yeah.
are all perfectly imperfect.
We're
as we're
all
meant to be.
perfectly imperfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and like the mediumship path is for me just a symbolic journey of the spiritual growth path. And um, when you're accepting anything from the spirit world and like sharing that and understanding that it's kind of like accepting anything inside of yourself and experiencing it and learning from it too. So
Mhm.
um, I just feel like there is so much that's available to us if we let down some of our guard and stop judging everything or everyone
Mhm.
or every experience. And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And that feels good.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think that's a really nice outlook on things and something for all of us to ponder and how we can bring that into our lives as well, right? Like just it helps you, I think, to create the reality you wish to live in within the reality of what you do live in, right? Like what is
Yeah.
like the microcosm of the macrocosm, like you said, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the other thing that, and I'm sure you feel this way too, because I'm just sure you do, but in case you don't, please tell me. But the other thing I feel so strongly right now is that it's really easy for us to get lost in our heads. And as we know, everything kind of moves from our imagination, right? And so part of the problem with anxiety is like living in the future, fears and worries. And then, whoa, all of a sudden, like those things happen. And we've kind of created it by living in that state of anxiety of our future all the time. And so it's easy to do that right now in the world when things are really heightened and unknown and tumultuous, right? It's really easy to, for me anyways, to go into like a mental place of like, am I going to be able to provide food? Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to care for this person? When instead I'm like, oh no, the real power is going inside of your heart, going inside of your soul, finding your spirit, and then really imagining exactly what you want the world to look like and how that feels. And then you're manifesting that into existence. And
Mm,
we forget so often that that's where all of the power comes from. That's where all of the life force is. It's like that, the fancy word is like your quantum realm, right? But really, you just imagine it, and that is the creation. And
yeah.
um, so, if everybody started doing that, instead of just imagining their fears coming to life, imagine their dreams coming to life for our planet, we would be creating that into existence. So, and I,
Mhm.
is that something you believe, Jeanette?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do. We are absolute creators, and it comes from the thought, and the thought for our creation comes from our free will choice within the destiny points that we decided when we came into this planet. So like we're constantly creating patterns through the energy that move through past, present, parallel lives. Like it's all interconnected and it's
Yeah.
all connected by thought and even more so by will, right? Like our will to will something into being. And I think we don't quite understand the true energetics of what will really means. It's not forcing something into being, like willing really hard and it'll be. Like that's not it. It's like it's coming into that natural energetic connection and belief that we are connected to all things and then creating from that point. And I think that's what a lot of people are starting to get an understanding of or snippets of.
Mhm.
I don't claim to understand all of it either. Like I think I'm starting to understand it now. And I think the more we have these kinds of conversations, the more it becomes a possibility, which then becomes something that we can create from. And then that changes the energetic collective.
That's so beautifully said, so much more eloquently said than I could say. And that's it. When anything becomes a possibility, then all of a sudden it's out there.
Hmm.
And then it keeps repeating and multiplying. And it takes one moment of recognition, like inside of yourself, like, oh yeah, I could believe that. I could believe
Hmm.
that. And then all of a sudden, like other people are believing that. Have you noticed, like, I've been noticing this so much on the collective consciousness scale is like, I will be getting these experiences in my meditations or in like my walks with spirit. And like these downloads and feelings and ideas in my head and ways to think about things and feel about things. And then I notice like across the board, other people are at the
Yes.
same time. And
Yeah.
it's like the most exciting feeling because I'm like, oh, we are collectively changing our consciousness right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we all can choose to do that by kind of lifting the veil of thinking things are always going to be the way that they are,
Mm-hmm.
because they don't have to be. Once we have a spark of belief that they can be different, well, we're opening the door for them to be different. So
Yeah, absolutely.
basically just what you said, I reinforced.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I think that's great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I swear we could talk all day long.
Mhm.
Um, how can people get in touch with you if they want to work with you? And what is it that you're offering? What kind of offerings do you have?
Mm-hmm. I do evidential mediumship readings, so I connect people to their loved ones who have crossed over. It is something I absolutely love to do. I do what I call soul readings, and that's kind of like more of a psychic energy. Instead of connecting to the world of spirit, I'm connecting to the person across from me and their energy and their guides and whatever comes forward in their energy field. And it can be a lot of things, as you know. And then I teach mediumship. I teach evidential mediumship. And
Amazing.
so those are my offerings. And
Yeah.
my website is www.spiritualmediumerika.com.
Awesome.
And my name is spelled with a K. And then I'm on Instagram, and I'm not on there that much, but I'm on Instagram as medium Erika Anderson.
Okay.
And um, yeah, so I'm just here as one of the many people who like to offer this connecting service to the spirit realm. I just
Mhm.
feel really passionate about I really feel passionate about the work I do. I don't really have any goal. I don't have an end result that I need. I just love being the intermediary between spirit and humanity, and being one of the many minions of us who is helping people connect to their source inside. And I feel
Mhm.
like through every reading, like it's such a blessing to be able to just do exactly what you and I were just talking about, is be a part of that spark of people realizing that there is more possibility and things
Mhm.
can be better and things can be different, and that we are connected. And that's what happens in readings. And it's just the most beautiful thing to me. So I'm so passionate about it.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that. And you also
Yeah.
have a podcast.
Oh, I do. I totally forgot.
Yes.
Yeah,
You
I
have your
do have a
podcast.
podcast. Yes, it's
Okay.
called Spirit Portal Podcast. And yeah, and on my podcast, it's kind of just an opportunity for me to speak what's in my heart and like coming through for me in my spirit. And then also I interview people, like I interviewed Jeanette on my
Mm,
podcast,
that's
and
so fun.
as everybody knows, your perspective is just so beautiful on this planet
Thanks.
and this life. And so, yeah, I interview people as wonderful as you, and that share their stories. Because, like you said, it really matters.
Yeah,
We all
absolutely.
matter. We're all so unique, and um, that is such a gift to be able to meet other people on their journeys, just where they're at. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Beautifully
yeah.
said. And I'll have all the links of all of those things in the description box below. So, like, if you are listening or watching, it'll be in the box below. Um, so I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insights, your stories. It's nice to hear more of your experience and all of that. So I'm so glad to have had you on the show. And like, you're such a bright light. And I really recommend people connect with you for sessions and readings because I've seen how you bring stuff through, and it's just this seamless merge with the spirit world that you have. It's a beautiful gift. So I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. And thank you for saying that. That just really means a lot to me. So I
Mhm.
appreciate it.
Right on. All right,
Yeah.
everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Bye.